What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another 3D model. This week we're going to be making an S.O.S transmitter. So let's not waste any time and let's just dive right into it. So this week's model is a little bit random. To be honest, I wasn't planning on making this for this week's video, but I'm currently living here in Ontario and we had a little bit of a snowstorm come through. We have a bunch of snow fall on the ground and it really got me thinking of the video game The Long Dark. I'm not sure how many of you out there have actually played this game, but if you're a really big open world survival video game fan, you should definitely check it out. It's one of my favorites. But with all the snow on the ground, it really got me thinking of this game and wanting me to create some sort of model that could be related to this sort of video game. I love the idea of just being caught in a snowstorm and out in the wilderness trying to find your way out. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of think of some sort of model or an asset that we can make that would be relevant in this sort of situation. Now, of course, thinking about The Long Dark, I started thinking about cool objects I could make for this week's video, and I thought about some sort of S.O.S transmitter, basically a radio, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of blend the lines between sci-fi and realism. So rather than just create some regular radio that you would find in a tower or something like that, I thought it'd be fun to kind of create our own that's a little bit sci-fi looking but also realistic. Honestly, these are my favorite types of models because you get to be a little creative and you don't have to basically follow a reference image exactly to recreate something from real life. You get to just be a little creative along the way and kind of create your own things that you want to incorporate into the model. So that's what we're going to do for this week's video. So I basically just gathered up random reference, but the main idea for this model was someone was just traveling in the wilderness and a big snowstorm came through and they found shelter in some sort of radio tower where they're snowed in and they can't leave. And basically they're trying to reach out to other people that could possibly be listening in through different radio stations or channels, just trying to look for help and trying to find a way out of this situation that they're in. So I thought it'd be fun to incorporate those little elements into this model, like a bunch of scribbles on the piece of equipment, like they're taking down notes or information from different radio stations that they're trying to reach, and kind of make a little bit of a scene with this asset. Now, I do still have family visiting from the holidays, so I don't have a lot of time that I can really invest in this model. I can't just sit in my office for endless hours because I have family downstairs. So we're gonna try to get through this fairly quickly and hopefully piece together a little S.O.S transmitter. Now don't forget, you can find this full video in real time along with all the working files, and you can find it all on my Patreon page, which will be part of the real-time video that I will post on there. So if any of that interests you and you want access to any of those working files, you can find it all in the link in the description below. Alright, so when it comes to modeling something like this, the most important thing is obviously blocking everything out. We first had to think about how we wanted this radio to look, so I was thinking a little bit realistic in how a model like this would be, so I looked up random radios online, and I thought it'd be fun to have your typical handheld radio, a little antenna on top, a bunch of knobs and switches, but also add some sci-fi elements into it, like different pieces of equipment that may not be truly functional in a real-world device, but something that just makes the prop look cool. So we're not going to worry about making it truly functional, we're just going to add a bunch of knobs and switches everywhere and try to make it look just interesting to look at. Now, a model like this is definitely going to rely a little bit more on the textures to bring it to life. So like every model, it's going to look pretty bad for a while, but we just need to stay motivated and continue modifying and changing our shapes, and hopefully it will slowly look better. And then eventually when we jump into Substance and we start adding all those textures, we can hopefully really bring it to life. So we're gonna obviously worry about that later on when we jump into Substance Painter, but for now we just need to block out all of those main shapes. So I'm not gonna worry about adding those details and all the fun stuff. We're just gonna focus on all the large main shapes in the scene, and once everything is placed and I kind of have an idea of how I want this model to look, then we can start refining those shapes and make it look hopefully more interesting. Now, something that might be a little bit different this week is I don't have a reference I'm directly working from, so we're gonna have to experiment a little bit along the way. So if you see me adding in some cubes and some cylinders, I'm basically just putting them in random positions where I'm thinking I'm gonna add some sort of device or some sort of shape, and then sometimes I end up removing it. So it's gonna be a little bit of experimenting along the way, but that's also what makes this one fun. So enough of me dragging this on, we're gonna continue blocking this shape out and we can slowly piece together this S.O.S transmitter. All right, so here is the S.O.S Transmitter in its finished form. And everything is basically the exact same. There are a few very small details I decided to add last minute. I always have a hard time choosing when to stop, and when I'm just looking at the model, I have other ideas that pop in my head. And one of them was just adding a simple switch, like switches like these. I added these last minute on the very side. I just thought it looked a little bit plain, and adding an extra switch is always fun. So I added that. And I also added these tiny little pieces of tape. I thought it looked too perfect for how weathered and beaten down I wanted this object to look. So I thought adding some sort of bent component or something that looked a little bit broken would just help bring it to life a bit. So I just bent this little frame, basically using the soft select brush by clicking avert and pressing B on my keyboard. You can click and drag how big you want it to be. I basically just bent it very slightly, and then I added some tiny planes that act as some sort of tape that was helping hold this in place. And I also added a tiny piece of tape on this wire as well down here. Like I said, there's no specific reason. I just thought it would look a little bit cool being a little bit more beaten up, especially because I was planning to add really weathered and beaten textures to this model. So adding something like this I thought would help bring it to life a bit more. Other than that, everything is basically the exact same. So let's go over these textures, and I'll show you how I did the UVs here and prepped it. So I decided to break this thing up into 5 textures. Yes, that's a little bit high, but this week we're just having some fun. I didn't really worry about optimization by any means, but something I just wanted to mention ahead of time. Obviously, if you were going to use this as a video game, you'd probably use high and low model workflow, so you don't have a bunch of subdivided meshes that are really high dense. It's obviously going to be a little bit heavy for your video game engine, so that's something I just want to mention ahead of time for anyone following along. This is more of just a random prop for fun. I guess you can say a portfolio piece or something like that, not optimized for video games. And that's why the textures 5 is definitely a little bit too heavy. If this was for a video game and you had 1 prop, this should realistically be 1, maybe 2 if it's a hero prop, but I would stay away from keeping 5 materials for a video game asset. That being said, let's go through this prop. So the very first texture and group is the body. So this one's pretty straightforward. Let me open up my UV editor and I'll show you what it looks like. I didn't worry too much about the UVs. To be honest, I was rushing this one a little bit when the UVing came through, but this one was pretty straightforward. I thought I would just keep the main body shape on its own UV map, and the main reason was I was planning to have a bunch of writing and text on these 2 panel pieces. So having these UV shells fairly large would just allow me to have more resolution, and I could see that text a little bit cleaner. If the UV shells were very small, they'd be very pixelated. And obviously there's workarounds, so if this was for a video game prop, for example, I would probably add all that text as a decal. That way you can have that text nice and clear, and you don't have to worry about having your UV shell large to incorporate for that text. In this case, we're not adding decals, so I wanted these UV shells to be fairly large so I can add all that text and it can be legible and you wouldn't be too blurry and pixelated. So this one's pretty straightforward. The handles and all these little components are sharing the same UV space, but I just wanted these 3 specific shells to be quite large, or actually these 4 shells or 5 shells. Anyways, the next group and texture are all the screens. I also added the little screws, but once again, I was planning to add more text on these screens, and I just wanted them. Oh, this one's a little messed up. Let me just move it. I have something in here that's this guy. Not sure what's going on here. We're just gonna unfold this one and put it aside for now. I'm not sure why this one's moved. I'll just shrink this down. But anyways, as you can see, it was just basically the screens. So I wanted these specific screens to be quite large. I had 2 screens, which I think I added in last minute as well. One to act as the glass, and then this one, and then there's another screen behind it. And I just wanted to add more roughness and reflections, I guess, on top of the screen, and having them separated would just allow me to achieve that a little bit easier without having to mess around with it to make it look like there's 2 screens or there's one underneath it. But like I said, just basically enlarging these shells so I can have nice resolution in them, so when I add some text to these pieces, they're not going to be pixelated. And the third group and texture is all of the knobs. Now this I could have definitely incorporated or combined into a different group. I was being a little bit lazy and we were moving pretty quickly through the UVing, so I just broke this off into its own texture set. But it's pretty straightforward. It's just all of the knob pieces as well as the tiny pieces of tape. And the next group are all of the wires and the handheld device, a couple extra little components that I had left in the scene. I just threw this all into its last group. Really taking advantage of that UV space, trying to squish them all tightly together so I can get the most resolution out of these UV shells, but pretty straightforward. There's nothing too special with this. I probably could have combined these two, the knobs and this one, into one group, just because there's not really too many words happening or labels, and I didn't really have to worry about the pixelating text, so I probably could have combined these, but it is what it is. And then finally, the last group are all of the paper pieces. And I just threw these again into one group. That way it'd just be really easy to texture in Substance Painter. Wasn't worrying about amount of textures being used, so I thought it only made sense just to throw this into its own group. That way all of these tiny pieces of paper would look really nice and crisp, the letters, and there wouldn't be any pixelating or blurry letters going on because the UV shells are very small. So I just decided to break this up into its own. So that's how I prepared my S.O.S Transmitter for Substance Painter. So now all I have to do is add a different texture or material to each group. So I have 5 texture sets in Substance Painter, and then we can start the texturing process. And don't forget, if you want to see the full UV mapping process in real time, it will be part of that real-time video, which I will upload to my Patreon page, and you can find a link to it in the description below. All right, let's jump over to Substance. All right, so now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in that FBX file from Maya and we can bake out our textures. Now when it came to the texturing, I really wanted this device to look beaten and kind of worn out, like it's a used old sort of radio, I guess, S.O.S transmitter found in like a radio tower, something that's really old and beaten up. So when it came to the textures, I wanted to add lots of dirt and grunge and lots of wear and tear. Now this one's pretty straightforward. We're going to use a lot of those smart materials as some sort of base material to work off of. So we're going to focus on just filling all of those white empty meshes with some sort of material, and then we can start refining them afterwards. Now usually I go through the full prop and I fill up everything, and then I come back and start adding dirt and grunge. I changed this one up a little bit this week. I thought it'd be fun. I guess just visually, I wanted to see the wear and tear to have a better idea of how I wanted this to look, because I didn't have a direct reference I was working off of. So I decided to add some wear and tear a little bit early in the process. So you'll see me starting to add some fill layers with some smart masks just to add a little bit of dirt and grunge. And once again, that's only because I wanted to kind of visually have an idea of the direction I wanted to work towards. And it just made sense in my mind to add it a little bit earlier in the process just to figure out how I wanted it to look. Now that being said, work however you want to work, whatever makes sense for you. I usually wait for all the dirt and grunge till the end, but this model was a little bit different this week, so I decided to do it a little bit differently. Now when it came to all the labels and stuff, I just searched online for random ideas. I just looked for radio control panels and just for ideas what I wanted the knobs and switches to say. And I thought, just because we're snowed in, I thought it'd be cool to add different radio stations on all these little sticky notes, like someone's writing down different information on possible contact and just different stuff that would hopefully be visually interesting for the viewer to look at. And you kind of stare at it and just look at it a little bit closer and kind of create your own story with what you're seeing from this model. So it was really important to make some of the text a little bit blurry and a little bit broken, like erased and marked up. That way the text doesn't look too clean and perfect, and it makes the viewer look at the model a little bit longer and try to understand what's going on. I really like the idea of creating some sort of story behind it, so that's what we're going to do with this model. We're going to make it seem like someone's stuck in a radio tower, they're snowed in, and they're basically looking for help. Now, of course, like I mentioned, you can find the full video in real time, which includes the full texturing process as well. And you can also get your hands on this Substance Painter file, which will be available on my Patreon page. So you can access all of it in the link in the description below. Check it out if you're interested. And Patreon's also the best way to support my work. So if you're interested in seeing more 3D tutorials or other real-time videos, well, Patreon's the best way to help support this page so these videos can keep coming. All right, enough of me talking and dragging it on. Let's start filling in these meshes with some sort of texture, and we can slowly texture our S.O.S transmitter. Alright, and that is everything. That is the full 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this S.O.S Transmitter. I really hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. I know it was a little bit random, but it was a lot of fun to make. It really got me thinking of The Long Dark, which I'm probably going to download and replay since it's been quite some time since I played that game. Also, you guys should check it out if you like survival open world games. But this one was a lot of fun. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget you can find the full process in real time on my Patreon page, along with all the working files, and it's also the best way to help support this channel. So if you're interested in helping support my art, please go check it out. And as always, a really huge thank you to all my Patreons for your continuous support. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's video, and I will catch you all in the next one.